I don't like being a player. I like being the game master, the DM, GM. They all kind of like tie back to the setting, which is one of my favorite things. Is just like good world building. And big people who enjoy lit RPGs, who like levels, things of that nature, definitely enjoy role playing games.
Well, awesome. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time again. So let me get you to just introduce yourself first, maybe introduce your book as well, and give me an opportunity to sort of hear about you and sort of what you've written before.
Of course. My name is Stephen Bandstra. I am based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I stumbled, I think, into lit RPGs because of my main love with role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Blades in the Dark, all those type of games. My first and only book so far, it's the first book in the series, Lethality, a lit RPG dungeon dive. Basically, 50 years in the future, dungeon diving is the top sport in the world, and we follow a diver on her first run into kind of a training dungeon and then into an actual dungeon along with 3 other divers who make up like her party. And so it's kind of like looking at this like dystopian world of you got all different types of kind of like sci-fi tropes, but the dungeon only, like the lit RPG elements only come alive in the dungeon itself. So you got levels. They don't translate to the outside. However, she could probably still kick my ass, even without her levels in Rogue.
That's great. And honestly, I actually really love that idea. That's a fantastic idea. Yeah. So good on you, man. That's fantastic.
Yeah. If you've ever heard of it, X-Crawl is by Goodman Games, I believe it is. It is a role-playing game where you're playing basically like adventurers in a like Roman kind of like themed world in like present day, where you're like going into like dungeons and you're like winning a refrigerator is like the top prize for beating a dungeon kind of things. And like, so like I stole that idea and just kind of ran with it, making it a little bit less gonzo and more serious.
Sure, absolutely. And was this the first thing that you'd ever like written before? Like, was this your introduction to like writing in general? Or did you like do a little bit like when you were growing up?
Yeah, so it's my first novel that is published. Back in middle school, I thought I was going to be this amazing writer that wrote like edgelord characters and like shadow demons and things of that nature. I'm sure everyone's had that type of that experience. And so like I've written half a dozen like story ideas. Some of them like I kind of finished, but like they're in such a draft I've never want to share them just because I was writing this in like middle school, high school. And then others, like I wrote like the first couple of chapters and was like, it's not really kind of going in like the idea I wanted. So this was like my first idea, and it took me 6-7 times to write the first half of it before I was like, yes, this is actually how I want to start. Because I wanted to start the book at like she's training in like these like gladiatorial schools basically to then do dives, but like every time I started it from that spot, like it just wasn't grabbing me as the author, so I couldn't imagine it grabbing anyone else. So I was like, you know what, let's just fast forward. She's gone through the training school and now she's going to her first training dungeon, and then she gets hired on to join a team, and then we're going into like her first dungeon. Like, let's get into the action and kind of skip that the training montage, as it were.
Yeah, you don't see that honestly as much as you probably should in stories, especially RPG, where like the RPG, especially nowadays, a lot of the ones are really taking their time to sort of like go through that like academy, and that'll take like 4 books of just like making sure, even if it's just like 1 year, that'll be 4 books of them just like learning all the things. And like, nothing against people who sort of go down that route, but it doesn't, it's something to be said about someone who can just like jump into like the actual meat and bones of like the story that they want to tell, which is fantastic. And it also gives you an opportunity of like, you could write prequels if you wanted as well, sort of like leading up to that, or have sequels. Or do you have anything like that in mind? Not a prequel, but maybe sequels that you've thought of?
Maybe like side stories that follow a different point of view. However, I mean, it took me 1.5 years to write this one book, not including the 6-7 false starts. So, sure. I'm hoping to have the second book finished this year, by the end of this year. So it's going to be a while before I'm like, you know what, I should start looking at other people. I do so much else. Talk about like what other books I've written. I also have So this is for my blog that I write, Dumpstead Adventures. We create content for Dungeons and Dragons, and so like that takes up a huge amount of my time for like writing is like also for the blog, because I try and release an article every week or every other week, which is like 1,000 to 3,000 words, where we create adventures, we write source books, things of that nature. And so unfortunately I just don't get to write fantasy as like a fantasy novel as much as I would like to.
Yeah. Do you want to talk on that a little bit more? So obviously, like, there's definitely crossover between people who are into D&D and people who like LitRPG. And a lot of people would say that, like, it's a perfect transition state where if you do like D&D, it's a great way to sort of transition over to LitRPG. But would you say that there's actually the cross-reference as well? The people who like LitRPG are probably going to like D&D as well. So there's sort of that cross-pollination happening?
Yeah, so I started Dungeons and Dragons 10 years ago, started my blog 8 years ago. And so that's kind of, I guess, more of how I fell into LitRPG. Was like people were talking about like, oh, there's this great series that includes game mechanics. And you're like, oh, that's really interesting. I think people who enjoy Lit RPGs, who like levels, things of that nature, definitely enjoy role-playing games. However, Lit RPG is more focused, it seems, on like a single main character, which is not really something that you want in a role-playing game when you have 3 or 4 other main characters at like the table. Like one person cannot be the min-maxy single focus. And so if you're going into a games with like that idea, then it's harder to tell those stories, because role-playing games are a collaborative storytelling game, whereas these books can be way more focused on a single character or 2 single characters.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair, and you're right. There's definitely, there are some books that do go and follow like a team of adventurers and sort of like how they all sort of work together and have that realm. And I saw a Blue Sky post where I had to give some recommendations the other day. So there are a few out there, but you're right. Most of them are following one individual who sort of is like either gaming the system or making it such that they're the strongest possible and they're being followed through the majority of their journey. It's just an easier way to story tell as well when you focus on one person as opposed to all the interactions of the different people, right? But I think that's
it also limits how many spreadsheets you have going at a single time.
Yeah. Absolutely. So how many of the books you just showed? The Toolcraft one, which looked really cool. You should show that again, by the way. That was really cool.
Toolcraft is our main source book. It's for D&D 5e. Basically, we were tired that there was no crafting rules in there. So we made our own. It's 160 pages, 40 different tools, kits, and supplies, over 400 recipes, lots of stuff. This is also like a Kickstarter, just because like I made like this series on our website years and years ago, and people were like, hey, is there like a single book I can buy? It's like, all right, we'll do it. That was a lot of fun, and I got to update everything. I've also written like a bunch of different adventures. I have others that we just haven't printed yet, but like you can get them as like digital kind of things. And they're all kind of set in my own like world of Talia for D&D. So they all kind of like tie back to the setting, which is one of my favorite things. Is just like good world building in books. If the world building is spotty, then I'm probably going to start losing interest quickly. I don't really care about like, oh, what cool skills someone has or things of that nature, but like I'm really going to get into like I want to know the history of the world and like, does it make logical sense throughout it? So
sure. No, that's still really, really, really cool, honestly. And do you find that, like, because you'd written those things previously, it's sort of like, I know you said it took 1.5 years, but do you find that because you'd worked so heavily on world building beforehand, it sort of like was an easy transition to do the world building for your novel, or did you sort of have to like change your perspective altogether when it went from like one type of world building to another type of world building?
I think it's definitely different types, because something like a primer to a world, like I can just talk about the world and that's what it's about. But like in a novel, no one is like reading it just to find out the history of the world. Like they want to follow a character around. So like I have to like be very mindful of like how much information am I sharing. I'm not like oversharing to the point of this is kind of boring. but rather I'm sharing in such a way that like it makes you interested in learning more about the world. And like, oh, that's a really cool idea that they did there. I can't wait to see more of like how that affects the story, or like what problems that can cause that they can kind of work with.
Sure. No, very, very cool. And one thing I want to make sure I ask about. So I've done a Kickstarter as well, and it's something that I'm learning a lot more of. Every single time you do a Kickstarter, I feel as though you learn something new. So how many have you? Is it just the one with the toolcraft, or have you done multiple because you had so many printed things? Or how was your process of doing that? How did you find it?
So we have done 2 successful Kickstarters, 2 that didn't make enough
Sure.
for like
Yeah.
the thing. And yeah, I mean, there's always something new to learn, and also like, you know, like we had one idea for a Kickstarter. It was going to be a big book. Unfortunately, this year has been hard on everyone's wallets, and so like we took that and kind of like cut it back, and then we did a Kickstarter just focused on like one core chapter that was in that book that I thought had like the biggest draw to it. And so, you know, like we're definitely planning on doing more crowdfunding kind of stuff. It is something that we're uh, starting to lean more heavily on, just because with the way that like Google search is going, and AI types AI search and stuff, like blogs are starting to lose their traffic, which was a big source of money for us to like fund these projects. So now we're having to like kind of shift. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think that's great. Honestly, I think you did. And so let's talk about the blog a little bit more. So you say you've been doing it for about 10 or 8 years. I can't recall.
8 years.
8 years. So how has that sort of process been? So I have a website, but I've never run a blog. And I feel as though that's like a long, like, and large endeavor. Like that is fantastic to be going for 8 years. Like you said, there's so many hurdles that you sort of have to jump over to make sure that you are still bringing in people. So how do you find you sort of like, one, get people to come to you guys and see your fantastic like articles that you're doing consistently, and two, how has it sort of been to be able to have this like organism that is your site that constantly grows and evolves?
It's been very interesting, especially as like technology is changing. We started like I write like GM advice, but also we look at the history of individual monsters in Dungeons and Dragons and kind of see like how do they change. Like, oh, kobolds were never really considered lizards until 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons in 2000. Before that, like they were kind of like these weird dog critters. And so like it's very interesting seeing how all these monsters have like evolved, and like me being able to like use some of like those older monster ideas that like no longer show up in newer editions, and like, oh, this would be a really good monster to stock into like a dungeon or something. But it's also been very challenging, especially as I mentioned before, like AI is taking more and more of like the search space. Like people are asking like, hey, I need this type of monster for this, and like all of a sudden those people who be going to my site, like they're just no longer going that, because they have like ChatGPT that they can bounce ideas off of, or ask for information about whatever, and like whether or not it's true in the world of like fantasy, like it maybe it doesn't so much matter for their needs. And then also like the Google search engine is constantly changing. There was a huge update like 2 years ago, and unfortunately tons of blogs were just kind of like hit by that. And so it's kind of just a constantly, you're always having to like produce content that is interesting, and trying to get more people to like notice you. And like the more that you can get people to go to the site, read your articles, the more likely they are to like, oh, I should check out if they've written anything on this. And so it's a very slow way of making fans, I guess.
Yeah. No, yeah, I totally recognize and I totally appreciate how the changing landscape of things really does like affect what you're doing, right? That is definitely a thing in all industries, but especially online industries, where you're at the whim of an algorithm, you're at the whim of sort of the changing whims of some technical folks out there. Of the things that you generally write about, so obviously on the GM side and also on the D&D side and stuff, and I know I'm saying D&D, and I know there's other types, but I'm just generalizing. I apologize as a layman. how is it that you generally come up with the things that you are going to be writing about? Do you find that there's like certain things that you gravitate to the most? Is it something that maybe you're like DMing yourself and you're like, oh, I could create something and talk about that? Like, how do you come up with your content?
You spend the entire week dreading that, like, you have to come up with another idea, trying to figure out what on earth after 8 years is there to write about. And then when you go to sit down, something comes to you. But I try to do like series. So like the tools were originally a series on the website, and like, that was 40 articles spread like that's almost a year worth of articles right there. And so like, if I can give myself like a series or like a general topic that I can go back to multiple times, like that's great. I did, there's a campaign setting for Dungeons and Dragons called Planescape, which is all about like the multiverse, where you're going to different planes like Elysium, Hades, the Nine Hells, Mechanus, Sigil. Like those are kind of like the bigger ones.
Sure.
And like I could look at each of these planes, and like that was a great 30 plus articles right there, just because I could just dive into a single one, and then a couple of weeks later I can look at a different one. So it's for me, it's what can I turn into a series? When it's like one-off articles, it's like, well, that's great for like a filler in between the series, but it's a lot more work for me to like think about like, what on earth am I going to say about this, or like what is there to say on this?
No, honestly, and it's as a writer myself as well, that's something that I definitely, when you are trying to write a series and you're trying to write like a book with whatever 30 to 100 different chapters and making each chapter distinct within itself, coming up with that thing is actually a very similar process, where you sit down, you're like, well, what am I going to do today? Like, what is the next thing that's going to either happen, or how is this going to be different from like all the other times that they went to school, or they went to a dungeon, or they fought a monster, or they did this or that? So coming up with all those different things are so different. Did you find that, did you have to do that when you were writing the book as well? Or are you having to do that while you're writing the second? You said you're writing the second right now.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's really easy for me to write like the dungeon and action scenes.
Sure.
Growing up, like I read a lot of fantasy books. Like my first foray into fantasy was the original Dragonlance trilogy, and from there just grew. And like I could easily write fantasy elements. The part that I struggle with is more like the slice of life kind of the drama in between characters when they're not in a dungeon, and I can't just be like, and a kobold attacks, and like you have to kind of like think about like how these people are reacting to like day-to-day lives. Like it seems exciting to be a dungeon diver until you realize like, oh, you have to train for 8 hours a day and like work on your technique and things. Like, how exciting is that? And so like coming up with like the drama is definitely where I slowed down my writing. And I can definitely tell like when I sit down to like write, I'm like, it's harder for me to produce those words than it's, oh, I'm describing a dungeon. This is a lot easier. And so like, maybe the reward for me is I get to write about the dungeon once I'm done with all the drama.
Yeah. I think it's honestly, and every person who writes has like certain things they enjoy writing more than others, and they have certain things that they're probably like stronger at writing than others. And even I would say, like, even if slice of life stuff doesn't come to you as naturally, because you probably spend more time on it, because you have to think about it more thoughtfully than you would like the dungeon and the adventure stuff that you're probably more like used to on the DMing side. I bet that stuff comes out fantastic. I bet it probably comes out really well because you've thought about it. So I have not read it, but like I said, the idea sounds fantastic. But those parts, if I were to read it, would probably stick out a lot more, which is fantastic. Yeah. How many books are you planning for within this series?
I've loosely planned between 5 and 7, just depending on like how much time jump do I want to do,
Sure.
Or like, and like I could easily write a book of just going through a dungeon, but like that's not driving the plot forward. It's not. I might say something that a little controversial. I dislike how a lot of series don't really seem to have an endpoint. Like, not to be mean to like He Who Fights with Monsters, but like the series is kind of written more as like a soap opera, where like you keep
Sure.
producing stuff and there's no like set end at the end of it, where like I don't like that, not knowing there's an end, because it feels like it'll just keep going on and on. You're going to go, like, you're never going to feel at the end of like the series like complete, just because like, oh, there's another book, there's something else that's going on. And so I like the idea of having like something complete and finished.
Yeah, you like having a goal in mind. So like,
Yeah.
do you feel as though within yours you have a specific scene that you're trying to get to, or a specific goal that you're trying to get to, like whether it's the character's goal or your own goal?
Yeah, if you read the book, by the end of the book, you should know exactly what my goal is
Sure.
for like
Okay.
the entire
Perfect. Yeah.
series.
Fantastic. That's amazing, right? Like
Yeah.
that's something that you want your reader to have like a sense of, right? Like, so like in my series, for instance, like she has to kill 100 people. So like the series will end when she kills 100 people. Like that is like upfront, you know, that sort of thing, right? So it's one of those things where I agree with you. I agree that it's good to have something in mind and make it clear to the user, the reader, not the user, what they're actually doing. Sorry, in my other life, I'm in software and finance stuff, so that's where user comes from. So as part of the conversation beforehand, I'd asked everybody to bring some like hidden gems that they wanted to talk about. So as part of this segment of sorts, I'll probably put up the cover for the book and like edit it in. So I'd love if you let me know which ones you think that people should be checking out.
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of cheated because these are not all specifically LitRPG. And I actually have 5 because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to cheat.
Yeah, cheat away. Go for it.
The first one I'm going to say is Dream Park by Larry Niven and Steve Barnes. It is a like 1980s LitRPG. It was one of probably the first, if I had to guess, where it's about present day. People are going into like a big LARP, but there's also levels, and like death just means like your hit points were depleted, and then but you're going into like this park as like a group of 20 trying to solve the big adventure. And I think that's, as far as I know, that's like one of like the first lit RPGs, though they didn't call it that then because, you know, it hadn't really been a thing. Another one that I really enjoyed was How to Defeat a Demon King in 10 Easy Steps. Is a shorter book, but I really appreciate it because it knows what story it wants to tell. It tells it, and then it's done. And I can't say it wasted a single page of telling its story, and I thought it was a very, very cool look. I don't know if saying anything more about it is like spoilers, but it's about how to defeat a demon king, and it's very interesting. And yeah.
No, it's a great book, and he's actually, I don't know if it's out yet because I heard this news a while back, but that one's getting published by like an actual publisher and like paperback and stuff. Yeah, he did. Yeah. He got a publishing deal, if I remember seeing it properly. Yeah. So that's by Andrew Rowe. So I'll have that on the screen as well. But yeah, it's a great book.
And then one that's cheating, I kind of already mentioned it, was X-Crawl, which is a role-playing game where you're in this kind of gonzo future of adventurers. Monsters are on Earth, but it's kind of all like a Roman Empire. Julius Caesar is like the God Emperor, and you're playing adventurers, rolling dice to like go into dungeons and win a mini fridge or a new car or something at the end of the dungeon. That one was kind of cheating on my hand, but for another lit RPG, Battle Mage Farmer by Seth Ring. I really enjoyed that first book. It hooked me really hard, and it's about someone who's already like basically like reached max level, and they're like quote unquote retirement. So there's a lot of slice of life in there with a little bit of action near the end of it. So that was very enjoyable for like a kind of a change in pace from like the normal books that I read.
Yep. No, I read that one too. Great book. Fantastic.
And then my last one is also cheating, which is a Pathfinder Tales Liar's Blade. So Pathfinder is like another game system, kind of a competitor to Dungeons and Dragons. And they have a ton of books in the World of Galarian by Tim Pratt. It's not technically lit RPG, but I really liked it because it includes. They're trying to do the opposite, where like we're trying to like highlight the mechanics. They tried to hide the game's mechanics into the fiction itself, and so like they don't talk about levels, they don't talk about spell slots. Instead, like they're like coming up with language to describe those type of things, and like how are you adventuring where you can fight like a level 20 wizard, but you don't have the words to call it a level 20 wizard. So I really enjoyed Liar's Blade. It's a fantastic little buddy comedy book between a sentient talking sword and a scoundrel.
Very, very cool. And honestly, not cheating in the slightest bit. I think that like, especially in the world you're in, I think it's cool that you have this like duality of like you're reading these Pathfinder and D&D-esque things, and you're also reading these LitRPG-esque things. And I think it's very, very cool. I think it's cool to see people who sort of are in both worlds because, like I said, there's so much crossover between them. I was at an event yesterday, and there was someone who was a DM, and I was telling her about LitRPG, and she's like, "Oh, I do DMing," and I was like, "We could probably talk about certain things." And though I haven't been in that world before, there's so many different things that we have alike, which is very, very cool. Do you find that so now obviously like so much of your time is spent with the website and with that sort of stuff? Do you DM yourself? Do you spend a lot of time DMing yourself, or is that a thing that you enjoy doing?
My partner, she always makes jokes about it. I don't like being a player. I like being the game master, the DM, GM. And so yes, I run 2 games. One of them is Pathfinder 2e. I'm running a modified for those that know anything about it. I'm running a modified adventure path called Strength of Thousands, where you're basically African Harry Potter, where you go into a magical academy. You're students, and you need to save the world by the end of the adventure. And then also I'm running a Call of Cthulhu adventure called The Two-Headed Serpent, where it's more pulpy, where you have like pulpy in like the sense of like Indiana Jones, The Mummy, things of that nature, where you have like these heroes doing kind of like larger than life things, but they're still very mortal. Sure. And so after that, I have lots of games I still want to play. And also, if you can tell behind me, I have lots of board games. I have a Frosthaven group that I know all the rules, so I get to be in charge of.
Hey, that's fantastic. Do you find the process of getting ready for DMing and the process of like writing your novel is like vastly different?
Yes and no. I make up maybe more than I should for DMing, and there's a lot more. I think, at least in this current series, there is not as much humor as I normally like inject into things. Sure. I don't know if it's just because like this is my first book, I need to take it seriously. But like I have ideas for a future book, like a standalone book that's like way more humorous and gory or whatever. Like, so yes and no. Yeah. It kind of depends on the day, I suppose.
No, I think that's totally fair. I think that's very, very cool. Okay, so one of the things I was also doing with people, it's sort of like a little game. It's basically like a would you rather, and it's really, I think your perspective will be really interesting because of the world you're in as well. So I have to come up with new questions for this, but for now I'm going to use the same questions that I have previously. So if you were, and I guess you could do this from a world building perspective or from a LitRPG writing perspective, but if you were to choose, would you rather write or do that as part of a romance world, or would you prefer to do it as, would you prefer to write a historical fiction? Which path would you go down if you had to choose?
Historical fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like history. Sure. It's a incredible kind of like what has happened in the past is like incredible, and like if you wrote it down in like a fantasy book, some people might be like, the War of the Roses, that's ridiculous, but like George R. R. Martin turned that into a Song of Ice and Fire that'll never get completed. So like
Well,
fantasy is very cool. Historical like fiction, fantasy kind of stuff, like very cool. I know you said historical fiction, so I can't include kobolds, but you know.
sure. Well, no one's making. You've already broken the rules once in our conversation, too. So there's no saying you can't break the rules otherwise as well. I didn't ask before, but do you read everything on Amazon, or do you look at Rural Road as well? I know that's very big within like the genre. So is that something you go to at all?
I I
You
don't
can
go
say
to
no.
Royal
Yeah,
Road. I typically it's Amazon or like for unfortunately a lot of the lit RPGs, mine included, is like tied to Amazon, Kindle, that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
that listen to a lot of audiobooks. Just I don't always have an hour, 2 hours every day to like read a book. I wish I did.
yeah.
Um, and then also because I read more than just like lit RPG, but like fantasies, things of that nature. Like I really enjoy an actual book and like holding it in my hands. So like bookstores, things of that nature.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. And honestly, like we all need to be supporting more bookstores and everything, and even just libraries. There's so much.
Mhm.
I have kids now, so like I'm back on the library train about recognizing how great they are as a resource. And when you're a
Oh yeah.
teenager and when you're like in your young 20s, I don't think you realize it as much. But like, there's points in your life where they are sometimes the most important resource around.
Or a poor
Um,
college student who really wants to read all of a certain series.
Yeah, exactly. That too. Exactly. Okay, so if you could write another series, would you go down the Portal Fantasy Isekai route, or would you go down the VR story route?
This is kind of 50-50 on this one. Because my next idea is more like Portal Isekai kind of thing.
Sure.
But I really want to write. But then I have another idea for like years away from here where it's like VR. So it's like I want to do both.
Hey, I
But
think
I
that's
I guess I'd have to say like Portal Isekai,
sure.
just because that's the next one that I want to write immediately.
Sure. Do you find that it's hard to sort of like write your current book with that one in the back of your mind? I find that sometimes it like pulls, you know what I mean? It's always pulling at you sometimes, and you're like, sometimes you can write down a chapter for the next book and just like push it aside and be like, okay, I've done something with it that's been worked on a little bit. Let me get back to what I need to focus on. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're like, I need to just like not think about it at all. Otherwise, I'll never get this main thing I need to be working on done. Like how do you sort of manage that?
It's very frustrating to manage that because I really want to write this next book, but also like I only have one book in the series out, and I want to prove like, hey, I'm not just gonna let like this one book sit there. I'm gonna write like
Yeah.
I keep telling myself like I need to write the second and third book at the very least, get like halfway through the series, and then I can do like a one-off as like a palate cleanser, and then go back and finish the series. Like I need to do that maybe just to prove to myself that I'm not just gonna like abandon the series for every new idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've definitely done that where it's like I'll write like if I have a very strong idea, I have I use Scrivener for like my writing, and
Okay.
so
Yeah.
like I'll just open up that Scrivener project file. I'll write the half chapter, or just like the basic idea that I had, close it, and then go back to the other book, and like that helps me a lot. Like I already got it out, I've saved it in a safe place, and now I can focus my full attention back on what I'm actually supposed to be writing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's very odd. And honestly, like as someone who I'm thankful I did finish my first series because I've left my second one for so long that people would think that I was going to abandon it, and people already do. But it's just life gets in the way. So I agree
Yeah.
with you wholeheartedly. You should absolutely prove to people that you can complete at least the majority of it and like show them that you are consistent. And then afterwards, they'll give you a lot more leeway as you move forward. Because yeah, you'll create a lot more trust in your readers. Absolutely. One thing I meant to ask beforehand, and I will get back to the questions in a moment, but I just want to make sure I ask it because I don't want to not ask it. In the books that you've done, especially on the DMing side and the one that you did on Kickstarter, you had a lot of art in that. Do you have like specific artists that you work with? Like that can get very expensive. So how do you sort of like manage the art of things? Yeah.
Yeah, it does get expensive. You're right.
Yeah.
basically a Kickstarter for us so far has been about covering the art costs. We just employ human artists. We don't use AI for anything. And so like something like Toolcraft, it has 40 tools in there. Each tool kind of has a couple of pieces of art in there.
Yeah.
I don't know, you can see it. I think my windows are blinding. That was easily 10 grand worth of art to like put into that book. And like our Kickstarter was for 10,000. And so, or 8,000, I forget what. And so like art's a huge part of these kind of like books because you know, as much as I'd like to think my words are entertaining, people's attentions will drift, especially when they're reading something like an adventure, which can be a little bit dry because you're doing like room descriptions. You're not so much describing the action that's taking place. Instead, you're describing the scenery so that the DM can describe it to like players. And so that can be a little bit dry. And so, and also by having art there, like you can kind of help the DM out. So like they're not talking constantly. They'll be like, they look like this, and then show a picture of the NPC. So yeah, art is important for these kind of books. For our latest Kickstarter, we're trying something new. We're using we have like a stable of artists that we really like. They're fantastic. They charge us what they charge us because they deserve that. But unfortunately, it's like if we're doing a smaller Kickstarter, then we have to rely on cheaper art like stock art, which some of it is good, some of it is bad. And so like you're kind of balancing your art budget between having custom art that says exactly the idea you want and stock art that's like, that looks like a thief. That's good.
Yeah. And honestly, like sadly, the world we live in now, a lot of that stock art might start becoming AI art, and people just don't credit it properly. So then you get these issues where people are like accidentally using AI where they didn't believe it was AI in the first place. And then they're like, no, I didn't want to use AI. Like I was not for it in the first place. That was not my intention, but like I had no idea because it's not properly attributed.
Yeah, and there's been a couple of people where like I would love to use the art you've made, but you seem to have a different art style every couple of pieces, like and you aren't really giving me any more information than that. So like I'm just just going to move on. And like even for like stock artists, you can have like a staple of artists. Like they don't know anything about me, but like I've seen a ton of their work, and I'm like, yes, you're great. I'm gonna bookmark your page, so I always go back to you to kind of see what you've already created. So I guess I have like two staples of artists. One who's like produces stock art that I'm like, they do a lot of great work. It might not be exactly my dream, but it still works pretty well. And then there's the ones who make me custom art. I wish I could afford the people who make the stock art because like they do stuff like Magic the Gathering and things of that nature, and like their art's incredible. I can't afford a custom piece from them, but
no, trust me, I do comics and I commission a lot of art, and I recognize how expensive it can be. And sadly, I think hopefully it's a little bit easier on the rules book side, where people hopefully pay a little bit more for those. But like when it comes to certain things, it's just the same as books. People expect like a $5 book when like that book is spent hundreds of hours being worked on, and it takes a lot of money to do, right? But that's a whole other philosophical issue.
Speaking of artists, like the guy who did the cover for this one, I found him on the Dungeon Crawler Carl subreddit. I was like, he does fantastic work. I want an excuse to hire him. Like I didn't have a project yet for my blog, but I needed a cover done, and so I contacted him, and he was awesome to work with. I wish I could remember his name immediately off the top of my head. Pretty sure. Oh, Levi Kleeman. I put it in the credits page.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so I'm looking at the time. Let me give you an opportunity to one last time, if you can, plug your book one more time. Tell us how much it will be as part of the massive LitRPG sale that's happening August 22nd. But really just, talk about yourself. Where can people find you? Talk about your website one more time. And then I say you to Patreon. Make sure to plug that. So plug your stuff if possible, please and thank you.
Of course. My name is Stephen Bandstra from Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan. I wrote Lethality, a LitRPG dungeon dive. 50 years in the future, dungeon diving is the top sport, and we follow someone as they're just entering into the sports and trying not to get their arm bitten off by a kobold. You can, for the big sale that you're doing, it'll be 99 cents. So you'll save $2 off of the price. I guarantee you it's worth 99 cents. I think you promised. You can find me on my blog, dumbstatadventures.com, or on Reddit. My username is VaranSL, VARANSL. And like from there, you can find everything else about me, Patreon, website, things of that nature.
From August 22nd to 24th, I'll be running a massive LitRPG sale. That sale will include at least 200 free ebooks, all within the LitRPG and progression fantasy genre. I'd like to thank everyone for checking out the site, checking out the sale, sharing it where you can, and an especially big thank you to all the authors and publishers who have given me their blessing to host this site. I really do appreciate it. Come grab some free books.